In the grand halls of Windsor Castle, where secrets whisper through ancient stones and betrayal wears a crown, one woman's thirst for power would shatter a family forever. Charlotte had always been the overlooked daughter, the spare heir whose intelligence was dismissed and whose warnings fell on deaf ears. But when she discovered the documents hidden in Camilla's private study, documents that would change the very foundation of the royal succession, she knew her moment had finally come. What Charlotte uncovered that cold December evening would expose a conspiracy so deep, so carefully orchestrated, that it had taken years to fully understand its scope. The woman the world saw as the dutiful queen consort had been playing a game of chess with living pieces, and Charlotte was about to flip the board entirely. Some truths are worth the destruction they bring. Some justice demands a reckoning no matter the cost. This is the story of how one determined princess, aided by an unlikely alliance with her brother William and a loyal palace guard, brought down the most dangerous woman in the kingdom, not through violence or scandal, but through the most powerful weapon of all, the truth. Charlotte stood at the rain-streaked window of her apartment in Kensington Palace, watching the Thames flow dark and restless beneath the December sky. At 28, she had learned to read the subtle signs that preceded family storms. Tonight, the air itself seemed charged with the electricity of secrets about to break open. Her phone buzzed against the marble windowsill. A text from Marcus, the palace guard who had become an unlikely confidant over the past months. His message was brief but urgent. Need to see you. Found something in C's study. Can't discuss over phone. Charlotte's pulse quickened. Marcus Henderson had been assigned to the security detail for Queen Consort Camilla's private quarters 3 months ago. What had started as routine surveillance had evolved into something far more significant when Charlotte had confided her growing suspicions about her stepmother's activities. The princess had always possessed a keen intellect that others in the royal family found inconvenient. While her brother William fulfilled his duties as heir with practiced charm, Charlotte had developed a reputation for asking uncomfortable questions and noticing details others preferred to ignore. It was a trait that had kept her on the periphery of family decisions, but it had also made her exceptionally good at uncovering truths people worked hard to hide. She grabbed her coat and made her way through the corridors that connected the various royal residences. The palace at night took on a different character entirely. During the day, it bustled with staff, visitors, and the controlled chaos of royal duties. After sunset, it became a labyrinth of shadows and whispered conversations, where the real business of the monarchy often took place. Marcus was waiting in the small office he used for security briefings, located in a section of the palace few people had reason to visit. He was a man in his early 40s, with the weathered face of someone who had served in military operations before joining palace security. His loyalty to the crown was unquestioned, but his growing concern about certain activities within the royal household had led him to seek Charlotte's counsel. "Your Highness," he said, rising as she entered. Despite their informal alliance, he maintained the proper protocols that his position required. "What did you find, Marcus?" Charlotte closed the door behind her and took a seat across from his desk. He pulled out a manila folder and opened it carefully. Inside were photographs of documents clearly taken with a concealed camera. "I was conducting a routine security check of the Queen Consort's study tonight. She's away at the charity function in Edinburgh, so the room was empty. I noticed her desk drawer was slightly open, which is unusual because she's very particular about keeping everything locked." Charlotte leaned forward as Marcus spread the photographs across the desk. The documents appeared to be correspondence, but the letterhead was unfamiliar to her. "This is communication with a private investigation firm," Marcus continued, pointing to the first photograph. "Look at the dates. This goes back 2 years, well before the king's illness became public knowledge." Charlotte studied the documents more carefully. The investigation firm was based in Switzerland, known for handling sensitive matters for wealthy clients who required absolute discretion. The correspondence detailed a comprehensive investigation into the medical histories and personal lives of various members of the royal family, with particular focus on what appeared to be genetic health markers and psychological profiles. "She was having us investigated," Charlotte said, the implications becoming clear. "All of us." "It gets worse," Marcus replied, moving to the next set of photographs. "Look at this timeline." The documents revealed a carefully orchestrated campaign that had begun shortly after King Charles's coronation. Camilla had commissioned detailed reports on the health prospects of every family member in the line of succession, with particular attention paid to any vulnerabilities that might affect their ability to serve as monarch. Charlotte's hands trembled slightly as she read through the clinical assessments. There were psychological evaluations based on public behavior analysis, medical predictions based on family history, and even financial investigations into the private dealings of various royal family members. She was building a case. Charlotte realized aloud, creating a portfolio of information that could be used to influence succession decisions. The most disturbing aspect of the documents was their focus on William's children. The investigators had been tasked with assessing the long-term viability of the young princes and princess, analyzing everything from their academic performance to their social development patterns. Marcus nodded grimly. But there's something else. Look at the recommendations section. Charlotte turned to the final photographs, and her blood ran cold. The investigation firm had provided detailed strategies for what they termed succession optimization. The recommendations included methods for influencing public opinion about various family members, suggestions for creating circumstances that would make certain royals appear unfit for their duties, and most chillingly, contingency plans for scenarios where natural succession might be altered. This isn't just about gathering information, Charlotte said, her voice barely above a whisper. This is about manipulation. She's been working to position herself as the power behind the throne, regardless of who actually inherits it. The documents revealed that Camilla had been in communication with several members of Parliament, sharing carefully selected information from her investigations to influence their opinions about the future of the monarchy. She had also been working with certain media contacts, providing them with stories that would subtly undermine the public's confidence in various royal family members. Marcus pulled out one final photograph. This is what convinced me I needed to bring this to you immediately. The document was a detailed plan for what would happen in the event of King Charles's death or incapacitation. Rather than supporting the natural succession to William, Camilla had outlined a strategy for installing a regency council that would give her unprecedented control over royal decisions. The plan included provisions for having William declared temporarily unfit due to the emotional trauma of losing his father, allowing the council to make decisions on behalf of the monarchy until such time as he could be deemed ready to assume full responsibilities. She's been planning to steal the throne, Charlotte said, the full scope of the conspiracy becoming clear. Not for herself directly, but she's creating a system where she would be the real power, regardless of who wears the crown. The rain continued to beat against the windows of the small office, as Charlotte and Marcus sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what they had discovered. The Queen Consort, the woman who had married into the royal family amid controversy and had spent years rehabilitating her public image, had been orchestrating the most sophisticated internal coup in the history of the British monarchy. What do we do with this information? Marcus asked. If we're wrong about our interpretation, or if we can't prove her intentions, we won't be wrong, Charlotte replied, her voice growing stronger with determination. And we're going to prove exactly what she's been doing. But we need to be smart about this. Camilla has been planning this for years. She has resources, connections, and she's demonstrated that she's willing to go to extraordinary lengths to achieve her goals. Charlotte began to pace the small office, her mind racing through the implications and possibilities. We need allies, people who have the power to act on this information and who can't be bought or intimidated by Camilla's influence. Your brother, Marcus suggested. If anyone has the authority to investigate this properly, it would be the heir apparent. Charlotte paused in her pacing. William had always been the responsible one, the son who followed protocols and avoided controversy. He had worked hard to maintain good relationships with all family members, including Camilla. Convincing him that his stepmother was capable of such elaborate deception would require irrefutable evidence. William will need more than photographs of documents, Charlotte said. He'll want to understand the full scope of what she's been doing, and he'll want to be certain that we're not misinterpreting innocent research or legitimate concern for the monarchy's future. Marcus nodded. What if we could get access to her communications? Phone records, emails, meeting schedules. If she's been coordinating with outside parties, there would be a digital trail. That's exactly what we need, Charlotte agreed. But it has to be done carefully.
If Camilla suspects that someone is investigating her, she could destroy evidence or accelerate whatever timeline she's working with.
The princess looked out the window at the sprawling grounds of the palace complex, thinking about the centuries of history contained within these walls.
The monarchy had survived invasions, civil wars, world wars, and countless political upheavals, but it had never faced a threat quite like this one, an enemy working from within, using the very systems and traditions of the institution to subvert its fundamental principles. We need to move quickly, Charlotte decided. If Father's health continues to decline, Camilla might decide to implement her plan sooner than expected. Every day we delay gives her more time to strengthen her position. Marcus gathered the photographs and returned them to the folder. I can maintain surveillance on her activities, document her meetings and communications, but we'll need to be prepared for the possibility that she already knows someone is watching her. Charlotte considered this possibility. Camilla had demonstrated remarkable patience and strategic thinking in developing her conspiracy. It was entirely possible that she had anticipated the risk of discovery and had prepared countermeasures. Then we'll have to be smarter than she is, Charlotte said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And we'll have to be willing to play the same kind of long-term game that she's been playing. As Charlotte prepared to leave the office, she felt a mixture of fear and determination that she had never experienced before. The stakes couldn't be higher: the future of the monarchy, the integrity of the institution that had defined British identity for centuries, and the safety of her family all hung in the balance. "Marcus," she said, turning back as she reached the door. "From now on, we assume that Camilla is always one step ahead of us. We plan for the possibility that she knows we're investigating her, and we prepare for the likelihood that she'll try to neutralize us if she perceives us as a threat." The guard nodded solemnly. "Understood, Your Highness. What's our next move?" Charlotte looked back at the folder containing the evidence of Camilla's conspiracy. Tomorrow, she would have to begin the delicate process of approaching William with information that would shatter his understanding of their family dynamics. She would have to convince him that the woman their father loved was capable of betraying everything the monarchy represented.
"Tomorrow, we start building our case," she said, "and we start preparing for war."
The morning after Charlotte's meeting with Marcus dawned gray and cold, with frost covering the palace gardens like a crystalline warning.
Charlotte had spent the sleepless hours reviewing every interaction she had witnessed between Camilla and various family members over the past 2 years, searching for patterns she had previously missed. She found them everywhere. The casual questions Camilla had asked about William's stress levels during public appearances. The concerned suggestions that certain royal duties might be too demanding for the younger generation. The subtle comments about the need for experienced guidance during times of transition. What Charlotte had initially interpreted as genuine care now revealed itself as calculated information gathering. At precisely 9 o'clock, Charlotte sent a coded message to William requesting a private meeting. They had developed a system years ago for communicating about sensitive family matters using references to childhood memories that only they would understand. Her message mentioned their old treehouse at Highgrove, which meant she needed to discuss something that could fundamentally change their family dynamics. William's response came within an hour. He would meet her at the private chapel in St. James's Palace at noon. The location choice told Charlotte that her brother understood the gravity of her request. The chapel was one of the few places in the royal complex where they could be certain their conversation would not be overheard or recorded. Charlotte spent the morning preparing her approach carefully. William was methodical and cautious by nature. He would need to see evidence presented in a logical sequence that allowed him to reach his own conclusions rather than feeling pressured to accept her interpretation of events. Marcus had provided her with additional photographs he had taken during his morning security rounds. Camilla had returned from Edinburgh earlier than expected, and he had observed her in urgent telephone conversations that required translation services. The Queen Consort had been speaking in French, which suggested she was coordinating with international contacts about matters she preferred to keep private. The chapel of St. James's Palace possessed an atmosphere that encouraged honest reflection. Centuries of royal prayers had been offered within its ancient walls, and the weight of that history seemed to demand truth from those who entered. Charlotte arrived early and used the time to organize her thoughts and steel herself for what would be one of the most difficult conversations of her life. William entered precisely at noon, his expression already serious. Despite his public image as the approachable, modern prince, he possessed their father's instinct for reading underlying tensions in family situations. "Charlotte," he said, settling into the pew beside her. "Your message suggested this couldn't wait." She handed him the folder Marcus had prepared, watching his expression carefully as he examined the first set of photographs. William's training in diplomacy served him well in controlling his immediate reactions, but Charlotte could see the muscles in his jaw tighten as he processed what he was seeing. "Where did these come from?" he asked after several minutes of silent review. Charlotte explained Marcus's discovery and their growing suspicions about Camilla's activities. She watched William's expression evolve from skepticism to concern to something approaching anger as he worked through the implications of the documents. "This investigation firm," William said, pointing to the letterhead. "I recognize the name. They were recommended to me last year when we were dealing with the security issues surrounding the children's school activities." Charlotte felt a chill run down her spine. "Recommended by whom?"
"Camilla," William replied, his voice barely audible.
"She said they were discreet and effective, that they specialized in protecting high-profile families from various threats." The pieces of the conspiracy were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Camilla had not simply been gathering information about the royal family, she had been positioning herself as a trusted advisor who could recommend solutions to problems she had been secretly documenting.
William,
Charlotte said carefully.
I think she's been manipulating all of us for much longer than we realized.
Every suggestion, every recommendation, every expression of concern has been part of a larger strategy. Her brother continued studying the documents, paying particular attention to the timeline and the specific information that had been gathered about his children. The psychological assessments of George, Charlotte, and Louis, he said, his voice growing cold. These are detailed enough to have required direct observation. Charlotte nodded. She's been watching them, documenting their behavior, looking for any signs of weakness or instability that could be used to question their fitness for future roles. The implications were staggering. Camilla had been conducting surveillance on children, gathering information that could potentially be used to manipulate succession decisions decades in the future. It was a level of long-term planning that demonstrated both extraordinary patience and complete ruthlessness. William closed the folder and sat back in the pew, staring at the altar as he processed what he had learned. If this is accurate, he said finally, then she's been playing a game that none of us even knew was being played. The question now, Charlotte replied, is what we're going to do about it. Before William could respond, both siblings heard the distinctive sound of heels clicking against stone in the chapel's entryway. They turned to see Camilla herself approaching, her expression composed but her eyes alert and calculating. "William, Charlotte," she said with her practiced smile, "how lovely to find you both here. I was hoping to have a word with you about the arrangements for the Christmas celebrations." Charlotte felt Marcus's warning echo in her mind about assuming Camilla was always one step ahead. Had their stepmother somehow learned about their meeting? Or was this encounter merely an unfortunate coincidence? "Of course," William replied smoothly, slipping the folder beneath his coat. "We were just discussing some family matters ourselves." Camilla moved closer, and Charlotte noticed that her stepmother's gaze lingered on the space where William had concealed the documents. "I hope everything is well," she said with what appeared to be genuine concern. "I know this time of year can be emotionally challenging for the family, especially with your father's health concerns." The casual reference to King Charles's condition sent another wave of unease through Charlotte. Was Camilla fishing for information about their father's current state, or was she subtly reminding them that the situations outlined in her conspiracy documents could become relevant at any time? "Father seems to be managing well," William said carefully. "The doctors are optimistic about his treatment progress." "That's wonderful to hear," Camilla replied. "Though I do worry about the stress levels for everyone during this period. Perhaps it would be wise to consider reducing some of the more demanding royal duties, at least temporarily." Charlotte recognized the strategy from the documents they had just reviewed. Camilla was suggesting exactly the kind of limitations that her conspiracy had identified as stepping stones toward implementing a regency council. "I think we're all managing our responsibilities quite well," Charlotte interjected, unable to keep a slight edge from her voice. Camilla's smile never wavered, but her eyes sharpened as she studied Charlotte's expression. "Of course, dear. I simply want to ensure that everyone feels supported during what can be a difficult time." The tension in the chapel had become almost palpable. Charlotte was certain that Camilla suspected something, while William appeared to be struggling to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the evidence they had just reviewed. "We should probably return to our duties," William said, rising from the pew. "Thank you for your concern, Camilla. We'll certainly keep your suggestions in mind." As they prepared to leave, Camilla placed a gentle hand on Charlotte's arm. "Charlotte, dear, might I have a word with you privately? There's something I'd like to discuss about your role in the upcoming charity events." Every instinct Charlotte possessed screamed danger, but refusing the request would only increase Camilla's suspicions. "Of course," she replied, forcing herself to appear calm. William hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with leaving his sister alone with Camilla under these circumstances. Charlotte gave him a subtle nod, indicating that she could handle whatever conversation was about to unfold. After William departed, Camilla's demeanor shifted subtly but unmistakably. The warm smile remained, but there was something predatory in her eyes that Charlotte had never noticed before. "You've always been the observant one," Camilla said, her voice taking on a different quality. "Your father often remarks on your ability to notice things that others miss." Charlotte remained silent, sensing that Camilla was probing for information while revealing her own hand. "I hope you know that everything I do is motivated by my love for this family and my commitment to the monarchy," Camilla continued. "Sometimes that requires making difficult decisions or taking precautions that might seem unnecessary to others.
The statement was carefully crafted to sound like a confession, while actually admitting nothing specific.
Charlotte realized that she was witnessing a master manipulator at work, someone who could reveal and conceal information simultaneously. "I'm sure your intentions are always admirable," Charlotte replied, matching Camilla's careful tone. "I'm glad you understand," Camilla said, her smile becoming more genuine, "because there may be times in the near future when family unity becomes particularly important. When difficult decisions need to be made for the good of the monarchy, even if they're not popular with everyone involved." Charlotte felt as if she were walking through a minefield.
Every word carried multiple meanings, and she was beginning to understand that Camilla was not simply a conspirator, but a sophisticated strategist who had been thinking several moves ahead of everyone else. "The monarchy has always depended on family unity," Charlotte agreed, hoping to extract more information without revealing what she knew.
"Exactly," Camilla replied. "And sometimes that unity requires accepting guidance from those who have experience navigating complex political situations. Your father values my counsel on such matters, as I hope you and William will in the future." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable.
Camilla was indicating that she expected to maintain her influence regardless of how the succession unfolded, and she was gauging Charlotte's willingness to accept that arrangement.
"I'm sure William and I will always appreciate wise counsel," Charlotte said, carefully avoiding any commitment while maintaining the appearance of cooperation.
"I'm delighted to hear that," Camilla replied, "because I've been developing some ideas about how the younger generation might be better prepared for their future responsibilities. Perhaps we could discuss them over tea sometime soon." Charlotte nodded politely, but her mind was racing. Camilla's reference to preparation for future responsibilities aligned perfectly with the Regency Council strategy outlined in the documents. Her stepmother was not simply monitoring the royal family. She was actively working to shape their futures according to her own vision. As their conversation concluded, Charlotte realized that the situation was far more dangerous than she had initially understood. Camilla was not operating alone or acting impulsively. She had been implementing a carefully designed strategy for years, and she possessed the confidence that came from believing her plans were already too advanced to be stopped. Walking back through the palace corridors, Charlotte felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She and William were not simply dealing with a family dispute, or even a straightforward conspiracy. They were confronting someone who had studied them all intimately, who understood their weaknesses and motivations, and who had been preparing for this confrontation far longer than they had. But Charlotte had advantages that Camilla might not have anticipated. Her reputation as the questioning, observant family member had always been seen as a liability by those who preferred comfortable illusions. Now, that same quality had revealed a threat that could destroy everything their family had worked to build and protect. The real battle was just beginning, and Charlotte understood that the next moves would determine not only the future of the monarchy, but the safety of everyone she cared about. Camilla had revealed enough to confirm their suspicions while positioning herself for whatever came next. Charlotte reached for her phone to send Marcus an urgent message. Tonight they would need to accelerate their investigation significantly. Camilla knew they suspected something, which meant she would likely begin implementing contingency plans immediately. The game had moved into its next phase, and Charlotte was determined to ensure that justice would prevail, regardless of the personal cost. The following evening brought news that changed everything. King Charles had collapsed during a private meeting with government officials, and had been rushed to the hospital under circumstances that demanded absolute secrecy. Only the immediate family and essential staff were informed. But Charlotte recognized that this was exactly the scenario Camilla's documents had anticipated and planned for. Within hours, Charlotte observed the Queen Consort moving with purpose and efficiency that seemed almost rehearsed. Phone calls were made to specific members of Parliament, key staff members were briefed on protocols that seemed suspiciously detailed for emergency plans, and Camilla began scheduling meetings with constitutional experts who specialized in Regency law. Marcus provided real-time intelligence from his position within the palace security apparatus. "She's activated something," he reported during a brief, encrypted communication with Charlotte. "Multiple contacts have been initiated simultaneously, and she's requesting access to documents that would normally only be needed if succession protocols were being implemented." Charlotte felt the walls closing in around her family. If Camilla proceeded with her Regency Council strategy while King Charles was incapacitated, she could potentially seize control of royal decision-making before anyone realized what was happening. "We need William now," Charlotte replied, "and we need everything we can gather about her communications in the past 24 hours. That night, Charlotte arranged an emergency meeting with her brother at Clarence House, his official London residence. The location offered better security than the palace, and William's personal staff were people he trusted completely. When Charlotte arrived, she found William in his study, surrounded by constitutional law books and looking haggard from the stress of their father's medical crisis. But when she presented Marcus's latest intelligence, his exhaustion transformed into focused determination.
She's been making calls to the same constitutional experts who provided recommendations for the regency scenarios in those documents, William said, connecting the pieces. She didn't wait for father to be declared unfit or incapacitated.
She began implementing her strategy the moment he was hospitalized. Father. Charlotte nodded grimly. Marcus intercepted communications suggesting she's planning to present a formal proposal to the Privy Council within the next 48 hours. If father is still unconscious or medically compromised, she could argue that temporary governance measures are necessary for the stability of the monarchy. William rose and began pacing, his military training evident in his systematic approach to the crisis. She's calculated this perfectly. Father's condition creates genuine constitutional questions that need to be addressed. By positioning herself as the person with ready solutions, she can present her Regency Council as a thoughtful response to an emergency rather than a predetermined takeover. But we have proof of her intentions, Charlotte reminded him. The documents Marcus photographed show that this was planned long before father became ill. Proof that she obtained information, yes, William agreed. But proving that her current actions are part of a conspiracy rather than legitimate emergency planning will be much more difficult. She's been careful to ensure that each step appears reasonable and necessary. Charlotte felt a surge of frustration at the complexity of their situation. Camilla had constructed her conspiracy with the sophistication of someone who understood that the most effective coup would be one that appeared completely legal and proper. There has to be a way to expose her true intentions, Charlotte insisted. She made a mistake today in the chapel. She revealed too much about her expectations for future influence over family decisions. William paused in his pacing. What exactly did she say? Charlotte recounted her conversation with Camilla, particularly the references to preparing the younger generation for their responsibilities and the expectation that she would continue to provide guidance regardless of succession outcomes. She's overconfident, William realized. She believes her plans are so advanced that she can afford to hint at her true intentions because she doesn't think we can stop her. A new idea began forming in Charlotte's mind. What if we turned that overconfidence against her? What if we could get her to reveal more than she intended to? Before William could respond, Marcus's voice came through Charlotte's earpiece. She had been wearing the security device since their investigation began, allowing him to provide real-time intelligence during critical conversations. Your Highness, urgent development. The Queen Consort is currently in the palace conference room with 3 members of Parliament and 2 constitutional experts. They're discussing formal regency procedures, and she's presenting them with documents that appear to be the recommendations we photographed. Charlotte relayed the information to William, who immediately grasped the implications. She's presenting our evidence as her own expert analysis. If those parliamentarians accept her recommendations, they'll essentially be endorsing her conspiracy without realizing it. We have to stop that meeting, Charlotte said. No, William replied, his expression becoming determined. We're going to join it. Charlotte stared at her brother in surprise. William, if we confront her directly, she'll deny everything and destroy any remaining evidence. We're not going to confront her, William said with a smile that reminded Charlotte of their childhood pranks. We're going to give her exactly what she wants. We're going to ask her to help us navigate this constitutional crisis. Charlotte began to understand her brother's strategy. You want her to think we're accepting her guidance willingly. I want her to believe that her plans are working perfectly, William corrected. And I want her to be so confident in her success that she reveals the full scope of what she's been planning. Within 20 minutes, William and Charlotte arrived at the conference room where Camilla was holding court with her chosen advisors. The Queen Consort's surprise at their appearance was quickly masked by her practiced composure. William, Charlotte, she said, rising to greet them. I was just discussing the constitutional considerations surrounding your father's medical situation with these distinguished experts. William nodded gravely. We were hoping you might allow us to participate in these discussions. Given the circumstances, Charlotte and I want to ensure we're prepared to support whatever measures are necessary for the stability of the monarchy. Charlotte watched Camilla's expression carefully and saw the flash of triumph that her stepmother tried to conceal. This was exactly the scenario Camilla had been working toward. The heir apparent and his sister voluntarily seeking her guidance during a constitutional crisis. Of course, Camilla replied warmly. Please, join us. We were just reviewing some recommendations for temporary governance arrangements that might be appropriate while your father recovers.
As they took their seats, Marcus's voice provided Charlotte with a steady stream of information through her earpiece. He was monitoring the room through security cameras and had positioned himself to observe the participants' reactions to the developing conversation.
William demonstrated masterful diplomatic skills as he encouraged Camilla to explain her recommendations in detail. Under the guise of seeking clarification and expressing gratitude for her preparation, he systematically prompted her to reveal information that went far beyond what would be appropriate for emergency planning.
"I'm impressed by how thoroughly you've considered these scenarios," William said. "This level of detailed planning must have required significant time and research. One cannot be too prepared when it comes to the stability of the monarchy," Camilla replied, warming to the praise. "I've been consulting with various experts for some time about potential contingencies." Charlotte leaned forward with apparent interest. "The Regency Council structure you've outlined is fascinating.
Have you given consideration to how such an arrangement might function during extended periods of incapacitation? The question prompted Camilla to elaborate on aspects of her plan that revealed its true scope. She discussed provisions for maintaining the Regency Council's authority even after the sovereign's recovery, if medical experts deemed continued oversight necessary for the monarch's well-being.
She outlined criteria for determining when family members might be considered unfit for their constitutional roles due to stress or emotional trauma. Most damning of all, she revealed her communications with international constitutional experts who had provided recommendations for managing public opinion during periods of uncertain succession. The strategies she described matched exactly the manipulation tactics outlined in the documents Marcus had discovered. Throughout the conversation, Charlotte noticed that the parliamentarians and constitutional experts were taking detailed notes. But their expressions had gradually shifted from attention to concern as Camilla's explanations revealed planning that extended far beyond appropriate emergency measures. William continued to encourage Camilla's revelations with questions that appeared supportive but actually highlighted the inappropriate nature of her preparations.
"Your foresight in developing relationships with these international experts is remarkable. How long have you been cultivating these advisory relationships?"
"Oh, for quite some time," Camilla replied, clearly pleased with the recognition. "One cannot wait for crises to develop expertise. I began building these networks shortly after the coronation, recognizing that constitutional challenges were inevitable given the changing nature of the monarchy."
Charlotte exchanged a subtle glance with William. Camilla had just admitted to planning Regency scenarios before any constitutional crisis existed, essentially confessing to the conspiracy they had uncovered.
The atmosphere in the room had shifted noticeably. The advisors were now looking at each other with expressions that suggested growing unease about the conversation they were witnessing. Marcus's voice and Charlotte's earpiece provided the final piece of intelligence they needed. "Security recordings show the Queen Consort accessing restricted constitutional documents last week, documents that would only be relevant for succession planning. I verified that she used her access codes to retrieve files that require specific authorization for viewing." Charlotte made a subtle signal to William, indicating that they had gathered sufficient evidence for their purposes.
Her brother nodded almost imperceptibly and prepared to move the conversation into its final phase.
Camilla, William said, his tone becoming more formal.
"Given the comprehensive nature of your planning and your clear expertise in these matters, I think it would be appropriate to present your recommendations to the full Privy Council for formal consideration." Charlotte saw the moment when Camilla realized she had been maneuvered into a trap.
The Queen Consort's expression flickered with uncertainty as she processed the implications of having her private planning thrust into the formal constitutional process.
"I'm not certain that would be necessary," Camilla said carefully.
These were simply preliminary considerations, not formal proposals. But surely such thorough preparation deserves proper recognition, Charlotte added. The Privy Council should be aware of the extensive research you've conducted into regency procedures and succession contingencies. The parliamentarians and constitutional experts were now clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. One of them, Lord Pemberton, cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps it would be appropriate to schedule a separate briefing for these discussions," he suggested. "The current medical situation requires immediate attention to established protocols rather than consideration of new frameworks." Camilla found herself in an impossible position. She could not withdraw her recommendations without appearing to abandon the monarchy during a crisis, but proceeding with formal proposals would expose her conspiracy to official scrutiny. William rose from his seat with the authority of the heir apparent. "I believe Lord Pemberton is correct. The current situation calls for established constitutional procedures. Camilla, I appreciate your
Extensive preparations, but I think Charlotte and I can manage the immediate responsibilities while father recovers.
The dismissal was polite but absolute. Charlotte watched as years of careful planning crumbled around Camilla, who was finally beginning to understand that her stepchildren had outmaneuvered her completely. As the meeting concluded and the advisors filed out with obvious relief, Camilla remained seated, staring at the document she had been so eager to present just minutes earlier.
Did you really think we wouldn't notice? Charlotte asked quietly, her voice carrying the steel that had sustained her through the investigation. Camilla looked up at her stepdaughter with an expression that mixed respect with resignation. You've grown quite formidable, Charlotte. Justice has a way of making people stronger, Charlotte replied. William moved to the door and signaled to the security personnel waiting outside.
Camilla, I think it would be best if you took some time away from royal duties while father recovers. Perhaps a private retreat would be appropriate for reflection on recent events.
The Queen Consort rose slowly, her composure finally cracking. You cannot prove anything beyond reasonable concern for the monarchy's future. We don't need to prove anything beyond what you've revealed tonight, William said.
Your own words, witnessed by members of Parliament and constitutional experts, have demonstrated the inappropriate nature of your planning and intentions. Charlotte felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness as she watched Camilla accept the reality of her situation.
The conspiracy had been exposed not through dramatic confrontation, but through the careful application of truth and patience. Over the following days, as King Charles recovered from what proved to be a manageable medical episode, the royal family quietly implemented new protocols that effectively ended Camilla's ability to influence constitutional decisions. The Regency planning documents were sealed as historical artifacts, and the Queen Consort's role was restructured to focus solely on ceremonial and charitable duties.
Marcus was quietly promoted to head of internal security, with responsibilities that included monitoring for future threats to the monarchy's integrity. The investigation firm that had provided services to Camilla found their credentials revoked after a thorough review of their activities.
Charlotte stood once again at the window of her Kensington Palace apartment, watching the Thames flow beneath a clearer sky. The crisis had revealed not just the vulnerability of the monarchy to internal threats, but also its fundamental strength when family members stood together in defense of justice and truth. The conspiracy that could have destroyed the constitutional foundation of the British monarchy had been defeated, not through violence or scandal, but through the persistent application of intelligence, courage, and unwavering commitment to protecting the institution they all served. In the end, Charlotte reflected, justice had indeed prevailed.
But the price of that victory was a deeper understanding of how fragile the trust was that held their world together, and how vigilant they must remain to protect the principles that defined their purpose. The future of the monarchy was secure, but Charlotte knew that the lessons learned from Camilla's conspiracy would shape how the royal family approached their responsibilities for generations to come.
Some betrayals, once revealed, changed everything forever, even when justice ultimately triumphed.